Have you ever wondered how a tiny bird can fly literally across the entire globe with no map, no compass, no GPS, and somehow just know where it's going? Well, the answer is one of the most incredible stories in all of biology. And believe it or not, it's powered by the absolutely bizarre and wonderful world of quantum physics.
I mean, really, think about that question. It seems so simple, but it's genuinely one of nature's greatest mysteries. We humans need maps, we need our phones, but birds like the European robin, they have this built-in compass that lets them pull off these feats of navigation that are just staggering. How on earth do they do it?
And for decades, that was the honest to goodness answer from the world's top scientists. We have eyes for seeing, we have ears for hearing, right? But we don't have any known organ for sensing a magnetic field. It was a total black box, a complete mystery.
So this ability, it's called magnetoreception. It's literally the ability to sense magnetic fields. And figuring out how it works, well, it's been called the holy grail of sensory biology. Why? Because it's pretty much the last sense we know almost nothing about. The quest to understand it has been a long and really fascinating one.
Okay, so here's the crucial part of the puzzle. The Earth's magnetic field, it is incredibly faint. We're talking about 100 times weaker than a little refrigerator magnet. So the idea that a living creature could not only detect this tiny field, but use it with pinpoint accuracy to navigate, that's what baffled biologists for so long. And this is where the story takes a really weird turn. The most promising clue didn't come from biologists who were out studying birds. Nope. It came from a physicist way back in the late 1970s who came up with this pretty wild idea that was rooted in quantum mechanics. It's called the radical pair hypothesis. And here's the core idea. A chemical reaction happening inside the bird's body, a reaction that gets kicked off by light, is so incredibly sensitive that it can actually be influenced by the Earth's super weak magnetic field. This would effectively let the bird feel it. So how does this so-called quantum compass actually work? Let's break it down into 4 key steps. First, a photon of light comes in and whacks a specific molecule in the bird's eye. This creates what's called a radical pair, 2 electrons that are now quantum mechanically linked together. Then, this pair of electrons just constantly flips back and forth between 2 different spin states. And here's the magic trick. The Earth's magnetic field changes the amount of time the pair spends in each of those states. That tiny difference creates a chemical signal that the bird's brain can read as a direction. So at its heart, the mechanism is surprisingly simple. You've got what's called a singlet state, where the electrons are spinning in opposite directions, and a triplet state, where they're spinning in the same direction. The pair is always bouncing between them, but the magnetic field kind of tips the balance, making one state just a little more likely than the other. It's this incredibly subtle quantum effect being used as a compass. It's wild. Okay, so a quantum theory from a physicist is one thing, but to actually prove it, biologists needed to find the molecule responsible for all this. The hunt was officially on for the physical hardware behind this biological compass. And you know what? They had a prime suspect right from the get-go, a class of light-sensitive proteins called cryptochromes. Why them? Well, because they were the only molecules known in animals that could pull off this trick of generating radical pairs when they get hit with light. They fit the profile perfectly. And it made total sense to look for them in the bird's eye. I mean, first, the whole theory needs light to work. And where better to find light than the eye? Second, earlier research had already shown that birds seem to process magnetic information in the visual part of their brains. All the clues were pointing right to the eye. But even with a strong suspect, the theory faced this huge barrier. It was just weird, you know? It came from quantum physics, a field that many biologists found, pretty difficult to understand and even harder to believe could be relevant to how a bird finds its way. It was a classic case of 2 different scientific worlds just colliding. So for decades, this just remained a really compelling but unproven hypothesis. But that all changed very recently when a team of researchers from Oldenburg and Oxford universities finally put this wild idea to the ultimate test. And let me tell you, this journey was not a short one. The theory was first floated over 40 years ago. The team leading this charge began the incredibly painstaking work of trying to isolate this specific cryptochrome protein way back in 2004. It wasn't until 2021 that they finally succeeded. Just think about that for a second. 17 years.
That's the level of dedication it took just to get the molecule onto a lab bench where it could be properly tested. That is a monumental achievement all by itself. And after all that time, they did it. They became the first and only lab in the world to have these specific molecules ready for testing. And their partners over in Oxford, they were the only ones who could measure them with the insane sensitivity needed to actually see these quantum effects.
And this quote just brilliantly sums up the breakthrough. The lead researcher could finally say, look, this isn't just a theory anymore. We have the protein in a dish, we are shining a light on it, we're applying a magnetic field, and we can physically see that it's magnetically sensitive. Theory had just become observable fact.
But then, they found something else that was just incredible. They isolated the same exact protein, it's called cryptochrome 4, from a migratory European robin and from a non-migratory chicken. The results were stunning. The robin's protein was way more sensitive to magnetic fields than the chicken's. It was the perfect evolutionary evidence to back up the whole theory. So, this brings us to the most mind-bending question of them all. If this quantum compass is in the bird's eye, what does the bird actually see? Let's just connect the dots here. We know the cryptochromes are in the retina. We now know for a fact they're magnetically sensitive. And we know the information gets sent to the visual part of the brain. The inescapable conclusion is that birds don't just feel the magnetic field. They might actually, literally see it. So what does that look like? Well, the researchers think it might appear as a pattern, or maybe a shadow, or some kind of filter that's laid on top of the bird's normal vision. And this pattern would shift and change as the bird turns its head, allowing it to line itself up with the magnetic field lines of the Earth. Now, of course, this spectacular piece of science doesn't close the book entirely. We have to be clear, this was a laboratory study. Showing a molecule is sensitive in a dish is a massive, massive step, but it isn't the final proof that this is the exact mechanism used by living, breathing birds out in the wild. That's the next big challenge. Still, the discovery is absolutely breathtaking. Even physicists who have studied quantum mechanics their whole lives are just stunned. The idea that these strange quantum effects, which are usually confined to super specialized labs, could be happening inside the eye of a bird, it's just an incredible surprise, a beautiful intersection of physics and biology. And that leaves us with one final fascinating question. If quantum mechanics is powering a bird's sense of direction, what other biological secrets are out there hiding in plain sight, just waiting for us to look at the world on a quantum level?